Hello everyone, my name is Laser and welcome to my channel, and today's video, which is all about critiquing Arcane, which is one of my favorite shows, and using it as an example to portray or to explain away some of the commonly used tropes when it comes to storytelling and using visibly disabled people or facially different people as villains in story. Or, portraying us as villains. Or using our disability or our visible differences to code that we are evil or nefarious or sly or fucking nasty or something. I don't know. It's a very common trope that a lot of you may not be aware of because it is so, hidden. But once I point it out, I promise you will start to see what I'm talking about. And I thought, what better show to use to critique this whole storytelling trope than Arcane, because it is such a fucking wonderful show and I love it so much. So just first of all, I'm gonna have a blast talking about this and talking about one of my favorite shows. And secondly, it just shows that, even when you are making a very close to masterpiece work of art, there are things to always improve on. And so that is where I'm coming from with this. It is not a takedown of anyone. And there's always a choice, as Victor said. That will tie in later, I promise. So why am I bringing this all up? Why is it even important to cut this trope out of storytelling? Why is it important to shift storytelling away from using facial differences as a way to portray villainy? Because I think even though we have some implicit biases that we aren't even aware of, I think that this way of storytelling just only reinforces these biases and introduces them to children, because, a lot of these shows children watch. I doubt a whole lot of children that are really young are watching Arcane, but one of the best examples of a child's film also introducing this stereotype into small children's minds is Scar from Lion King, because his Scar is literally his name. It is used to portray, that he is a villain. He is evil, and I can pull up clips from that movie too, from The Lion King too, to portray how they used his scar as the way to tie him to being evil. Aside from his abhorrent actions of killing his brother, because that was crazy, but introducing that fear into people when there's no reason to have that fear is unnecessary, and it harms us. So that's why I think removing this type of storytelling or this trope, it would be awesome. And that's why I bring it up. And you see this among a lot of different characters amongst very famous TV, some of which are Scar from The Lion King, Freddy Krueger, the Joker from Batman, and Alphaba. Now, Alphaba's a little different because we all know that she's not the villain, right? But in the movie, literally, her having green skin and her visible difference, even if it's not a straight up disability in this case, is used as a storytelling device within the story as part of why people think she's so evil. They use it as an additional thing to cling on to when they are making up all of the lies about her and spinning the story. It's such a subtle storytelling device that I didn't even notice it until it was pointed out by members of my own community, the facially different community, when they started linking everything together and painted the picture for me. And I was like, well, damn, no wonder we have such stigma hitting us in the real world for no reason. There's a reason for it, and it is in these storytelling things. And once you see it, it's really hard to unsee. As someone with a facial difference, I have always wondered why my face garners so much of a shocked response and a fear response when I'm going up to meet people. It never made sense to me, and it had me deal with a lot of personal struggles when I was younger, aside from the medical stuff that was obviously involved. Just the stigma around having a facial difference is a lot to deal with, specifically when people are scared of you for just having a different face. It sounds really ridiculous, but it's a true thing that has happened multiple times. I've had mothers, like, pull their children away from me, thinking they're gonna catch my face or something, or toddlers will get scared and run away, which is always sad because I'm not gonna do anything to you. And a lot of times, a lot of people are curious, but there is that fear that is often associated with my face, and I've never really understood it before. Why do people think my face is so scary? Why is it the devil? Why? So, why does this thought process even exist? I believe that this often unconscious way of thinking is an amalgamation of many different factors, but frankly, in my opinion, the whole core of it leads back to unfamiliarity. You know the quote, people are scared of what they've never seen? I think I'm paraphrasing it, but that's frankly it. I can pack up the whole video right now if I wanted to and leave you sitting there with that. But there's more to it that I wanted to dive into because I'm all about asking why 1,000 times until I feel like my hunger for knowledge is satiated. So I'm gonna continue to info dump on you. But people are often afraid of unfamiliarity, what they have not seen before, and then they unconsciously start pairing that just base fear that they have with other preconceptions that they might cling on to from information that they've seen from the outside world that then trickle down and amalgamify into this one, like, weird stigmatization towards this one group that they don't even know. One of the most blatant examples I've seen of this is the Uncanny Valley effect, was a fairly recent term coined by Masahiro Mori, specifically when it comes to robots. That's the original use for the term, trying to describe why people, when robots were starting to look more and more human, people started to like them more and more the closer they got to looking human. And then once they reached a certain point of looking human enough, but something still wasn't quite right, people could still tell that they were a robot, the robot approval rating went into the shitter, and people immediately did not like them, but were, like, just creeped out by them. And a lot of people immediately registered these robots as, like, scary or dangerous. But at least to me, this term has a much broader sense to it, and encapsulates a lot of the discrimination and judgment that visibly different people receive on a day-to-day basis, because that's the whole gist of it too for us, is we can tell you're human, but something's not right with you, so what is that? If we peel that back one more layer, we can see that a lot of this stuff just comes down to, like, instinctual, this is all more theoretical. Some of this is backed by science. Some of this is just me talking from my butt. But, such as, some of these things are as simple as, like, trying to avoid illness, which is some of why people think that they're gonna catch my face, which you're not. Please leave me alone. And so also, like, finding the optimal mate based off of certain characteristics and features that prove to be desirable when mating. I hate talking about that. Oh my god. From trying to find the optimal mate, you then have the halo effect, which was born. And the halo effect is something which is attributing beauty with grace and elegance and all the good characteristics. Embracing, if you're beautiful, you're a good person, which is also a very common thing we see out in the world, where the more beautiful you are, the better you are treated, because people immediately think that you are a better person in general as well. And so a lot of times this halo effect has the opposite too, which is the Uncanny Valley effect. Some of these biases are literally encoded into our DNA. And so I understand that some of it is not something people are even aware that they have. But that is my exact goal in bringing this up, is because I'm aware that all of us are human, and we have the opportunity, when we learn new information, to implement it, and therefore change our minds going forward, and way, way long in the future, that over time changes our DNA. And that is my goal, to over time foster a much more accepting place and accepting society for visibly disabled people. So to bring it back home to Arcane, what characters did they use to perpetrate this trope? Silco is the most prime example of this, but even Victor, to a certain extent, in a less precise way that I can pinpoint. But I'm still going to talk about Victor because he's my favorite character, and I have to talk about him. But anyways, Silco is our prime example of this. Even from our very first interaction with Silco, is his glimmering eye cast in shadow to show his villainous and scary intent and scary personality. That his face was used as a scare to tell and direct the audience to know immediately that that's the bad guy. Cower in fear, fellow folks. His face is used as a storytelling device to help portray and nail his character into the minds of the viewers as a evil villain. And this comes up again in the second scene to really nail that thought into the viewer's head. The scene lingers at the end of his sentence on the scarred side of his face before it moves on. Another secondary but still commonly used trope in the storytelling format is to use the moment that a character acquired their visible disability to signify when they became a villain. And this kind of shows up in Silco's story as well, when he got slashed and thrown into the river where all of the toxins ate his face. That was exactly the moment where he became a villain.
But then there's this thing in your head, and it's raging, lighting every nerve with madness. To fight, to survive. That day, I let a weak man die. And another was reborn.
Hi, Editor Laser here. I was watching the clip of Silco getting his facial scars and facial difference, and one thing that really stood out to me was, of course from his vantage point, he is talking about becoming stronger, letting the weak version of himself fade away, and that the moment that he got his disfigurement matched with him becoming this new version of himself. But again, to make my point clear, this version of himself is the fucking villain, right? So that's, just wanted to point that out, get that in there. The fact that they use the moment that he acquired a disability, as the point where he became evil and a villain, further solidifies the fact that having a disability or a visible difference, you must be a bad person, a bad, bad person. It's almost like a subtle nod to the belief that when you have a facial difference, you must have done something to deserve it. And some of that may even stem back to, like, the weird belief that originated in churches or a religion that you must have been cursed to receive this horrible affliction, such as a facial difference. When oftentimes it's not a case of that, it is just, being born with something you can't help and you are just trying to live like everyone else. When it comes to Victor, his visible disability isn't immediately used as a way to portray him as a villain, because he's not a villain for a majority of the show. He's one of the core characters when it comes to trying to use hex tech to save lives, to help lives become better. That was one of Victor's main goals, right? But something that was interesting to me that they changed in the second season once he got, entangled with the hex core after Jace stuck him in there to save him from dying, was when he started to shapeshift, when he started to, morph into Mecha Jesus Victor, who became a cult leader at the end. What was interesting to me is they had to change his appearance. And, part of it is really odd to me to be talking about this, because I understand the need to change someone's appearance to tell a story, right? I get that. Your appearance is an important part of who you are to some extent. It tells people about you. And that's actually why, this is so important, why this whole stigma that is surrounding, facial differences is so important, because people immediately tie facial difference to having negative characteristics, that ties you to being a negative person, even if you are the most sunshine and rainbows person to ever exist in the world who had never heard a butterfly. So I understand needing to change someone's appearance, and so that's what they started to do with his leg, right? When he first injected himself with the modified shimmer, his leg started turning turning purple when it started getting enmeshed in with the hex core, and that signified him starting to change. We knew something was up with him, but we didn't know what exactly. Even then, it was kind of used to kind of infer that he might be changing in a way that could be scary. But the moment it was really solidified that Victor was a villain now, he had donned a mask that covered his face that fully signified the transformation to an otherworldly being that is not here with the same objectives as us. And he wasn't in that case. He was not really there much anymore. He did not have his own thoughts about much that was not heavily influenced by the hex core. Hi, Editing Laser here. That is the moment where he loses all of his humanity. The rest of what makes him Victor is gone, and all there is left is the Machine Herald. That's what I was trying to say. And you even see this to a little bit of a lesser extent with a lot of Silco's goons, or a lot of his mob members. You have Sabika and her limb difference of a missing arm, right? And she is a morally gray character, but more objectively slanted towards the villain side when it comes to the way she is portrayed in the story. Although I really do understand what she was fighting for. I get her struggles. I know what she was trying to do, right? But even her arm kind of like slyly kind of hints that something happened to her and it's not good. It may sound quite surface level what I'm saying, because a lot of it is, but at the same time it's so important because it impacts facially different people so deeply. It's kind of funny because there's not a whole lot more examples because the example gets worn out. The trope gets worn out. It is only used really as a shock factor to kind of like immediately pair your first impressions of the characters as a villain, or to signify that their morals now have shifted to something of that you can no longer associate with safely. At the end of the day, as Victor said,
there is always a choice.
There's always a choice in how we choose to act in the world. And, in Victor's case, a lot of what he chose to do was to try to use his time on Earth to help people with hex tech, make lives better, right? And I think that's what a lot of people want to do with the time that they have, is try to make the world a better place. And so this is an opportunity I saw to help make people more aware of a commonly used trope that I see in a lot of films. That if that trope were to be less used, would, I think, make the stigma of having a facial difference a lot less prevalent. And I think that would be awesome, If you guys liked this video, let me know. If you guys would like any more Arcane takes from me, let me know. I have a lot that I would love to share. This is my first, media analysis video, so, bear with me. If you have any advice for me, I would also love to hear it. And, yeah. Thank you very much, Finch, for, again, giving me the idea to create this video, awakening the idea in me again after I'd forgotten it from watching the first season. And, yeah, I will see you guys later.